Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is an innovative weekly web series capturing the diverse and colorful lifestyle of Alaskans. Real stories of everyday Alaskans at work and play. Supported in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company.
The National Weather Service.
Mic on, and we've got some advisories, wind advisories here for the Alaska Range on the north slopes of the range there west of the Tok Cutoff for tomorrow and tomorrow night. Gusts up to 40 miles an hour possible in that zone, and here around the greater McGrath area also a wind advisory out, and this one for tomorrow and Monday. Winds kicking up 40 to 45 miles per hour in gusts, or 40 to 50 miles an hour. And so that's well below the warning criteria, but high enough for advisories. And same view there. And yesterday we had the big storm out here to the west. Two features really affecting the state. Another upper level low, which brought storm force winds to the Barren Islands early yesterday, gradually shifting northward and weakening. Intense cold frontal system pushing into the western Bering Sea, or from the western Aleutians eastward and up into the southwest Bering Sea, and that very deep low center out there pulling the cold air in around it, as you can see by the open cell cumulus on the southern and southwest quadrant of the system there. But you see a couple of bands moving north and northwest, bringing some showers and rain. Kodiak Island, all up and along the southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula, up in toward western Prince William Sound. And today you can see that whole thing, or most of it, has shifted inland and weakened. Kind of a break here between the incoming front and this thing lifting northward. Still have a couple of bands out here along the North Gulf Coast and into the southeast coast. So this will be moving through tonight, and then it looks like good high pressure will build in ahead of this front as it continues to weaken, or continued to weaken today. But it looks like it'll kind of re-enhance here on the Pacific side of the peninsula. So we've got some good gales pushing up into the Kodiak Island area tonight and tomorrow, and they'll spread up into the Barren Islands, and of course right into the interior where we have those wind advisories out. So it'll be a pretty windy day for the Alaska Range, western Alaska Range, into the Kuskokwim Valley, right down into Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island. But today we had southeast winds as this front came in. 35 to 45 miles an hour in gusts, gusts to 50 miles an hour or more in the channel areas of the Alaska Peninsula. But those dropped off as the front pushed through, and we still have that low center there, northeast of Shemya, gradually moving eastward here. And that brought 50 to 75 mile per hour wind gusts during the day today. Again, confined out here to the southwest Bering and the western Aleutians. Some rain moving through Adak with that band of moisture, but a lot of showers on back to the west and northwest. And looks like it possibly cleared out there over the Pribilof Islands. Again, the Alaska Peninsula, another batch of showers rolled into some areas of the eastern Aleutians. And again, for today, low pressure down here to the south and the warm fronts pushing northeast. That should stay mostly down in that area. Again, what's left of the upper level trough here will be sliding through the southeast coast tonight. And gradient again right through here. That's well, where the lines are closest together, that's where the wind speeds are the strongest. And again, 35 to 50 miles an hour in the gusts through this area. And of course the tighter gradient and the higher winds out to the west and southwest toward the main low center. For tonight, looks like gusty winds out of the east here for St. Lawrence Island, some snow to go along with it. Milder conditions, so a mixture of rain and snow, especially the farther southeast you get. Again, depending on your elevation, but quite windy conditions. Again, gales rolling into the Kodiak Island zones here from southwest to northeast. Winds will be increasing southern Cook Inlet, Kamishak Bay, and again across the Alaska Range and on up in toward the Bering Strait areas. This low still pretty deep, slowly weakening and slowly shifting eastward a little bit. And this trough now, again, will bring more showers, scattered showers in over the southeast coast, keeping it occasional showers up along the North Gulf Coast as well, with some scattered snow showers inland, but then cuts right off here from the Alaska Range on up, mostly fair skies and dry conditions back to the northwest, including the Arctic coast, but rain heavy at times for Kodiak Island. And you can see high pressure here developing over the northeast Pacific and the eastern Gulf of Alaska. So this will slide on through tonight, and should see a mostly sunny day with light winds for the Panhandle tomorrow, with again fairly decent areas of high pressure here developing over the eastern Gulf of Alaska and the Panhandle, right along 140 west for the upper level ridge. In this front pushing inland here, we have a low that developed, or a wave on that front, should lift into Bristol Bay tomorrow. And so look for strong winds. Could see gusts 40 to 60 miles an hour, Kodiak Island, up into the western Alaska Range, Sparrowvon, and other locations will be quite windy tomorrow. And that, of course, across the Nikolai McGrath areas. And it looks pretty brisk all the way up to the northwest areas, Kobuk Valley, Selawik, and in advance of that front up as it pushes up across Kotzebue Sound. Winds diminishing though for the southern Seward Peninsula. Areas of snow up in here, kind of a mixture right here through the pink areas, and then rain, heavy at times, Kenai Peninsula, Resurrection Bay, Kodiak Island, right up into Iliamna, possibly Port Ellsworth. And out to the west, not much change. Still have this huge area, low pressure, well west of the Pribilof, so gale force winds all along the Aleutians of the Bering Sea, and again here for the Barren Islands, Kodiak Island, and cutting off there somewhere along the western North Gulf Coast, and markedly lighter winds as you head eastward toward Prince William Sound and Cordova. For the Monday outlook, some scattered rain and snow showers, low pressure down here to the south, so we're looking at a southeast flow, and so that's going to pull some of this moisture back up to the North Gulf Coast. But it looks like the best chances of rain, Resurrection Bay into Prince William Sound, especially on the west side of the sound there with some mixture of rain or snow, but pretty light and scattered there inland. Alaska Range there, upslope areas could see some snow shower activity. Flurries or light snow up here over the northwest part of the state. Another front develops and brings increasing chances of rain, mostly Cape Newenham, rain or snow up to the Seward Peninsula, and a lot of showers and brisk winds out over the Aleutians, with that low center now pulling northward just southwest of St. Matthew Island, and that south to north flow keeping it wet along the Alaska Peninsula, especially on the Pacific side. But not too bad for Bristol Bay, mostly cloudy skies there and basically dry. Sunshine for the most part, maybe a few clouds for the Panhandle, and that fair condition right up over the eastern third of the state to the Brooks Range, Arctic coast, and North Slope. For temperatures today over the southeast coast, mid-40s, 42 though at Skagway, 43 in Juneau. Sitka pushed up to 46, and Yakutat, with just under an inch of rain in the last 24 hours, had 41. Cordova was at 45, and same thing at Middleton Island. Anchorage 37, 44 both at Homer and Kodiak, as well as AKwx, and up in the Copper River Basin, Gulkana 15 degrees, but 34 over at Talkeetna, and warmer air aloft showing up there at the Denali Park Visitor Center with 43 degrees, but north of the mountains 16 there at Fairbanks, and Tanana had 15, just 14 in McGrath, 3 degrees above zero at Fort Yukon, and 11 at Bettles, Anaktuvik 12, and the Arctic coast a little either side of zero with -2 over at Dead Horse, 5 above Kaktovik and Barter Island, 0 Point Lay, 22 at Cape Lisburne, and a 23 at Kivalina, while Kotzebue was at 24. 18 Shishmaref, and 30 degrees there down to the south at Nome. Right at the freeze mark for Savunga, upper 20s here for the Yukon Delta coast, above freezing at Macoriak with 34, Bethel up to 35, and looking farther southwest, 42 at King Salmon, mid to upper 40s for the peninsula, lower 40s for the Pribilofs and all of the Aleutians. Lows tonight, 10 to 15 below for the coldest areas to a little above zero, especially as you pull back to the west here to upper 20s there for the Seward Peninsula, and mid 30s here over Bristol Bay to lower 40s over the peninsula and Aleutians, upper 20s to lower to mid 30s, warmest along the north or the coastal areas here, and upper 30s for the Panhandle. And for the highs tomorrow, 30s here over the southwest to near 40 along the coast, mid 40s Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, cooling to the mid 30s at St. Lawrence Island, but you can see rising above freezing here across the Seward Peninsula on up toward Point Hope and Cape Lisburne, while the southeast coast back into the 40s, lower 40s along the coast, inland areas of southern Alaska here, mid to upper 30s. And flying weather, IFR, a good possibility, western Prince William Sound, right down the southern Kenai Peninsula coastline to Kodiak Island, mostly on the east side, that south to north flow there, so marginal VFR Shelikof Strait. Then you pick up the IFR again here for the Alaska Peninsula on the Pacific side, right up and on the eastern slopes of the western range here. Just some scattered marginal VFR on the east side of the range, and areas IFR over the southwest interior, breaking out along the coast, southeast flow, VFR of Bristol Bay, back to the west a little bit, and then some more IFR in that west-southwest circulation spreading into the Pribilofs, but it doesn't look too bad of a day here along the Aleutians. Passes VFR for both Anatuvik and Adigun on both north and south entrances. Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR on the west side, marginal in the pass, IFR on the eastern entrances. And for Rainy, same pattern, but drop the IFR to say marginal from the pass to the east and VFR to the west. For Windy, occasional IFR possible, chance of anyway here on the southern entrance, but the trend will be better to the north, VFR on that north side. Isabel, same pattern, marginal VFR becoming VFR in the pass, marginal holding though for the southern entrance, but Mentasta starting out marginal only on the south side, otherwise becoming VFR all the way through. And for Tanita, marginal VFR possible on the eastern entrance, otherwise VFR. And for Portage, IFR, Chilkoot and White, VFR, not only tomorrow, but probably the next several days as well. For the freezing levels, got still some warmer air aloft out here over the Bering Sea with that east-southeast wind flow pulling that back up into the north-central areas, but colder air coming in that direction, and kind of a warm pocket aloft here over the north slope in the Arctic coast, and otherwise not much of a gradient, and then 4,000 to 6,000 to 8,000 feet there over the Gulf of Alaska with that south to north flow nudging that northward toward Kodiak Island. And with that will be icing possibilities here below 7,000 to 9,000 feet. Some of that could be isolated areas of moderate rime icing up along the coast up to the western Alaska range, with some icing extending back up toward the Bering Strait and northern Bering. Otherwise, some areas of scattered mixed stuff out over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. Winds aloft, big upward low here associated with the deep surface low, and the jet south up to 170 knots. Over the trough axis drops back to 50 knots. Then a good south to north flow at 150 knots there, right into Kodiak Island, diverges here over southern Alaska, up and over the ridge, northwesterlies, 100 knots across the Queen Charlottes. And for 9,000 feet, low pressure in the Bering, 35 to 50 knot winds, still around that. And here along the frontal boundary, where the gradient's the tightest at the surface, 50 to 70 knots at 9,000 feet here tomorrow. Again, the wind advisories for the northern Kuskokwim Valley. Lighter winds to the east, and same pattern there. Could get a little gusty here along the southern southeast coast tomorrow, those northwesterlies, till the high settles in over the area. 50 to 70 knots southeasterlies here across Kodiak and up across the Kuskokwim Valley. And with that, areas of severe turbulence for smaller aircraft mostly below 8,000 feet, or actually below 5,000 feet for the severe stuff. Light to moderate will be below 8,000 or 9,000 feet, and that's good through tomorrow. A lot of the Bering Sea pretty turbulent, as well as the southern southeast coast, but that'll be improving. And after the break, I'll be back with the marine forecast.
Winter. Cold, wet, and deadly. Every year, snowstorms strand hundreds of people in their cars, isolate thousands in their homes, and kill those who are unprepared. In this film, you will see and hear true stories about 6 people caught in severe winter weather and isolated from help. Ed and Paul Maluski were going to their cabin to button it up for the winter when it began to snow.
The storm hit about halfway up the mountain. By the time we got about a mile from our cabin, we kept getting stuck every 10 feet.
We were always out digging, which got us wet. Then the snow got real heavy, and you couldn't see 5 feet in front of you. It was pretty clear the Bronco wasn't going to make it, so we figured we'd walk to a neighbor's cabin. It wasn't real far, and we know that area like the back of our hands.
The funny thing is, everything changes at night, and with the blizzard, well, you couldn't tell which way you were going. I thought I knew, but boy, I just couldn't tell for sure.
Dad! Leave this back here! We don't need it! There's food in the cabin!
You know, it was funny. I'd be thinking real clear for a while, and then just didn't know what I was doing or where I was going. I couldn't even remember Paul's name, my own boy, and I couldn't remember his name.
I got worried wading through that snow. Dad was really beat. He could barely keep up. I started thinking about things I'd never thought about before. I fell and dropped our flashlight and didn't pick it up right away like you normally would. I knew we were getting delirious then. Then we hit that gate. Well, it's nowhere near the cabin.
We've gone too far! Let's go back to the Bronco!
Paul, we can't go back. We wouldn't make it. I wouldn't make it. We've got to find that cabin or we can't make it. Now, come on, we've got to find that cabin.
From then on, I just kept thinking, you gotta keep going. You gotta keep pushing.
I saw that cabin and said one long prayer. I could hardly believe we finally found it. We walked for 2.5 hours and it was less than a half mile from the Bronco. All I could think was, we had to get inside. We finally got in. And then we didn't say anything at all. We didn't talk.
Ed and Paul had become victims of hypothermia, a physical condition caused by a person's body losing more heat than it produces. The result? A dangerously low body temperature. When Ed and Paul were outside, the conditions were perfect for hypothermia to set in. It was cold, and they were tired and wet. First, their bodies tried to generate more heat to combat the cold. They began to shiver. It was a losing battle. The constant exposure to cold, wet weather defeated this first line of their body's defense. Then, in order to keep the remaining heat concentrated in the body core, the brain, heart, and lungs, their bodies began to cut down blood circulation to their arms and legs. This gave their vital organs a fighting chance to continue functioning. But it also caused the loss of muscle control in their hands, legs, and arms. As their natural defenses gradually began to break down, they became more confused and disoriented. If they had not found the cabin, the cold would have defeated all their body's defenses, and they would have died. In this kind of emergency, the first thing to do is get out of the cold. Then, carefully begin rewarming the body. The most important areas to rewarm first are those areas nearest the body core, the sides of the chest, the neck, the groin, and the head. These are the areas of highest heat loss and highest heat absorption. Warming these areas first lets the body build back and hold its heat, starting with the body core and gradually spreading to the rest of the body. Ed and Paul did not rewarm themselves correctly. They began by warming their hands and feet, and that could have killed them. Warming the body's extremities first forces cold blood to flow back to the body core. The result is usually death. Paul went to bed that night shivering uncontrollably because his body had not been rewarmed properly. Both men needed medical assistance desperately. It's a miracle they survived. Part of the miracle was the cabin they broke into. It was owned by a man who believed in being prepared for anything.
Once we got warmed up, we found plenty of wood for the fire. Besides, there was a propane tank to heat the cabin too.
There was plenty of food, enough to last us a couple of weeks. And you could eat it right out of the can. You didn't need a stove to cook it on.
Nothing. Well, they know we're gone. Yeah, they should.
Candles, flashlights, lanterns. All were on hand with plenty of batteries and fuel to keep them working. Ed and Paul even found a battery-powered radio. It was a relief to hear that rescuers were out looking for them. The cabin had a well-stocked first aid kit, too. Ed and Paul were stranded way up in the mountains, far from any help. But even in a city, snowstorms can be dangerous, especially for the elderly. The elderly can fall victim to hypothermia even at home. It's essential for them to maintain warm room temperatures of 68 degrees Fahrenheit or more. Continued exposure to low room temperatures can easily cause older people to become hypothermic, and it is very difficult to detect.
Your turn now.
They usually don't shiver as hypothermia takes hold, but their breathing may become shallow and their heartbeat may slow down. Either of these symptoms during cold weather means medical help is needed immediately. The best cure, of course, for anyone is prevention. Stay warm all the time, eat well and regularly, and keep physically fit. These factors will help protect you from winter cold.
Did you get back to the clinic this morning? Good.
Welcome back. Well, northwesterlies could start out a little brisk here over the southern southeast coast, dropping down to the 15 to 20 knot level during the afternoon tomorrow. Lighter winds here through the central inner channels and southeast, still possibly as high as 25 knots or east-southeast up along the north coast. And then pretty light winds basically in a northeast direction, offshore flow here for dry conditions all along the panhandle, 10 to 15 over the inside waters and about the same here along the outside coast. And for the North Gulf Coast, lighter winds to the east, southeast 20 for Prince William Sound. Mid-Sound could see a few higher gusts and maybe small craft advisory level winds over the southern portion of Prince William Sound, but 30-knot winds increased to gales here at Kodiak Island, 40 to 50 knots across the Barrens in toward Kamishak Bay, and winds coming down under gale force to 25 to 30 here for the marine areas either side of Kodiak Island, and getting a little gusty over the southern inlet up to 30 knots, dropping back to 20 through the forelands and a little to the north of the forelands. And then much lighter winds in store for Monday, northeast for the northern inlet here at about 10, and easterlies become southeast down from the higher values tomorrow to just 15 knots for the Barren Islands, southeast, east-southeast, 15 to 20 for the North Gulf Coast, and pretty light winds now for Kodiak Island. For the Bristol Bay area, south 20, otherwise 30 to 40 knots. Strongest winds will be over here again in that windier area towards Sitkinak to about Chignik. Otherwise, small craft advisories for the peninsula right out of the south. Those become or back to more southeasterly directions at 25 knots, Bristol Bay at 20. And for the Aleutians, southwest or west, possibly these gusts possibly up to 50 knots, but gales out for tomorrow, the entire stretch of the chain, and then gales still lingering, but coming down 20 to 25 knots for the Fox Islands, kind of a gale force area right through here, falling back to 30 from the northwest for the western zone out there. And for the southwest coast, 30 to 35 knot winds from the southeast, easterlies across the northern Bering Sea and St. Lawrence Island, south 35 at times for the Pribilofs. Lighter winds, but down to 20 knots maybe southwest or southeast of Nunivak Island. Small craft advisories up towards St. Lawrence Island, and gales here over the northern Bering Sea and that St. Matthew Island zone. Small crafts though for the Pribilof Islands. And moving up to the Arctic coast for tomorrow, easterlies. Lightest on the east side, about 15 for the central coast, and 20 to 30 knots here right through there for the, from the Bering Strait, 30 knot winds right up into the zone west of Cape Lisburne. And for Monday, light variable winds, some kind of a trough lifting off the coast. So these winds may become west and west-southwest late in the day, but only at about 10 to 15. Otherwise, easterlies and another trough kind of mixing up the wind direction, but light for the west side of the coast, 20 knot southeasterlies on down the coastline. For tonight, pretty good front pushing inland, a wave rolling up toward the Alaska Peninsula. It's going to bring gale force winds, tighten up the gradient there across Kodiak into the southwest interior. Big storm still out in the Bering Sea. High pressure for the southeast coast, dry conditions there. Right up the east side, gusty winds, rain heavy at times, Kodiak Island, southern Kenai Peninsula, right up into Iliamna, very gusty winds for Sparavon, and gusty winds with areas of snow, wind advisories for McGrath. And for Monday, wet and stormy out in the Bering Sea, drier and cooler over the eastern interior.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.